Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Espresso, your daily shot of Chinese words with Catherine Xiang. I'm Catherine Xiang. 大家好，欢迎来到我的频道字 Espresso。在这个频道呢，我们看字和词之间的关系。So if you're new to this channel, we explore the relationship between Chinese characters and words. But this is a brand new playlist. It's called 名师讲坛. So in this playlist, I will interview fellow Chinese educators and experts to share their research, their unique teaching approach, and top tips to our students. 那么非常荣幸，在今天的名师讲坛呢，我可以请到宋濂仪博士，然后呢，在这边跟大家分享他独特的教学科研。宋老师 ，Can you say hi to friends of the Espresso first?
Hello everyone. Hello 向老师 Thank you.
Great. So as you know, in this channel, I really want to get to know our experts and share their unique perspective. I'm today particularly honored to interview Song 博士. And because when I started teaching, Chinese about 20 years ago at the University of Bristol, he was already an established author. I remember I was using Teaching Yourself Theory, edited and written by Song 老师. So I'm extremely excited to have him on our program today. So first, please allow me to introduce him formally. Song Lianyi 博士, he is Principal Teaching Fellow in Chinese at the SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. He has taught Chinese in the UK for 30 years, as I've explained. When I only started my career, he was already established author. And in the past few years, he has taught both intermediate and advanced business Chinese at the SOAS. He was chairman of the British Chinese Language Teaching Society, known as BCLTS, from 2002 to 2004, and has been one of the advisors since. He has worked as an external examiner for Chinese at over a dozen universities, and his research covers Chinese language pedagogy in general, but more specifically language assessment, teaching of writing. So Song 老师, welcome, and very pleased to have you here with us again. So talking about research, so I know you've been involved looking at benchmarking, looking at how Chinese language would work in relation to the European assessment. So can you share with us a little bit more about that particular research?
Thank you, Xiang 老师 for your introduction. Yes, I've been always interested in language pedagogy in general and specifically assessment. I feel that as a teacher, my responsibility is to make sure that the students learn in the right way and the more effective way. But how do we know that the learning is effective and so on? We do it through assessment. So is our assessment fair? And whether that's the best way for us to, for example, to guide learners through their learning and so on. That's what I was interested in. So over the years, I've been working on this. And then some 8 or 9 years ago, there was this project funded by the European Language Council, investigating whether the CFR, whether it is applicable to Chinese. At that time, I don't think I knew the answer. Therefore, I joined the project. So I would like to first of all talk to you briefly about this project that I was involved in. Let me first share the screen so that we.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now let's start. As I mentioned earlier, so CEFR. I knew this a long time ago, but what it actually involved in, I wasn't quite sure. So when I first of all was asked to join this project, I was very happy because I wanted to find out more, and I thought that it was important to Chinese language learning. So as you can see, the CEFR stands for the Common European Framework of reference for languages and so on. So the central question was, at that time, does it apply to Chinese? And then in order to find out this, then we have to look at what the CFR involves and what does it say and whether they are applicable to Chinese. So that was this project. It started in 2010 and lasted for 2 years and funded by European Language Council. It involved 4 universities, as you can see. So I don't need to go into details. So I was at SOAS, of course, at that time. So I represented the British part in this project. Just very briefly, I want to say that our finding was, to put it very simply, CFR is largely applicable to Chinese. I said largely because Chinese is very different from other European languages in some ways, yeah, especially in terms of writing. So if you look at CFR, which is a guide for language learning, teaching, and assessment, it is inevitably we have to pay a special attention to writing, because Chinese writing is different to other European languages. And that was one of the reasons many Chinese teachers, when we started this project, they were not necessarily happy or ready to accept CFR, thinking that, oh, that's for European languages. Yeah. So our finding is, first of all, we need to embrace CFR because it is a general guide for all languages. It didn't claim, or it still doesn't claim, it is suitable for all languages in all aspects. So that our project started with that, to look at whether it was indeed applicable to Chinese. And our finding was, I can use the present tense now, it is largely applicable. So if we are familiar with CFR, people will know, okay, well, CFR tells us in terms of language use, what you can do at this particular level. So what we call can-do statements. So we examined the can-do statements for level A, A1 and AB, A2, for example. And our conclusion then was, these statements are fine with Chinese, but we need to slightly modify some of these statements to reflect the Chinese language, the Chinese culture. To give you a specific example, so in the CFR description, they would say at, for example, level A1, you could probably write a simple postcard. If you're on holiday, you could just say, oh, the weather is fine, so on. But can you imagine for a Chinese learner to write a postcard in Chinese? So it's quite European. Okay, probably nowadays people don't really write postcards anymore. They just send a text message and so on. So all these you can see, if you say you can do this, if we simply copy CFR saying that, oh, if you want to learn Chinese and if you want to reach A1, you should be able to write postcards. I don't think it is quite suitable. So that's one example. So that's point 2. The third point is that teaching and learning Chinese characters need to be highlighted as an area that requires attention. I said earlier, for example, we have to admit that Chinese writing is different to other European languages, in that Chinese script is not necessarily phonetic. So all the other European languages are more or less phonetic. What I want to say is that their speaking is closely related in their writing, whereas that's not the case in Chinese. I know you have investigated in this, for example, characters, words, the differences between writing and speaking, for example. Yeah, this project showed that we need to pay attention to this. To be slightly more specific, for example, in other European languages, it's easier for us to say, okay, you can write this, yeah. But if you look at the Chinese, when you say to write what, so to physically write characters is extremely difficult, in that when we speak Chinese, the sounds, for example, the pronunciation is not reflected in our writing. So we don't feel it as a Chinese speaker. Whereas for a learner, say I can say hello, I can say 谢谢, but how do I write it down? I probably can write pinyin, but no Chinese would say this is not Chinese. So that's the difference. Our final, my main, for example, point here is that for other aspects, for listening, speaking, and reading, it's fairly easy to transfer CFR statements to Chinese. But for writing, It's not. I mean, I just want to emphasize this. Of course, I can elaborate, but because of time constraint, I just stop here to highlight these 3 points.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I just got one quick question. So obviously the finding is very interesting and useful. How do you see that can be applied to our teaching, particularly, of course, in the European context, to the teachers and to their teaching methodology?
Oh, in many aspects, I would like to highlight maybe 2 things. The first one is that I mentioned earlier, I was interested in assessment. Yes, I have been all the time interested in assessment. So we have to look at how we assess people's abilities, right? Okay, let's look at exams. Yeah. So for secondary school students, if you want to do Chinese, they have GCSE, for example. In our universities, we have the final exams and so on. Do we require the students to be able to physically write characters or not in the exam? I'm not saying what we do it in our teaching, because teaching is very much determined by the way we assess students. So, okay, look at the GCSE. They need to write. The new syllabus requires students to be able to translate from English into Chinese, writing characters. They need to write a composition, writing in Chinese characters. Therefore, you just have to teach them how to write. Yeah, but CFR is not concerned, CFR as a guideline is not concerned with whether people can write or not. It simply says that at this level, you should be able to write something. Write what? Okay. For us, or the Chinese teachers, or for learners, the first thing is that you need to be able to write characters. Yeah, and it's a long and complicated process. So that's number one. If we can't change that, we just teaching characters, physically writing characters, it has to be part of our teaching. However, CFR doesn't say that you have to be able to write characters. It simply said at this time, you could leave a note. Yeah, you could write a report, you could write a summary. But if you require the Chinese learners to be able to write all that, just at the same level as other European languages or learners to reach that, to put it in a different way, people would think it's slightly unfair because you use the same standard for a totally different language. It just makes it extremely hard, if not impossible, for teachers to implement. They say, okay, we have reached this level after, for example, a year. Why can't you? We can't, because it takes time. So I think that's one of the main implications.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important, like you say, try in the teaching process to understand the difference between writing skills as opposed to Chinese character production skills. They are not the same thing. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, so that's a little bit research from your work. Thank you for sharing. And I know you also involve more projects related to specifically Chinese learning pedagogy. Would you like to share that with us as well today?
Yeah, okay. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to talk about my project. I've been doing, for example, research, for example, on and off, but most importantly, I've been involved in some projects that I developed myself. I would like to start with some kind of background, yes. So I've been the year abroad tutor. So our students go to China to study for a year. So I've been their year tutor. Then I started to notice that, well, is that what they really want when they study in China? And I also have other students who ask me, for example, Song Lao, could you recommend a university so that I can go there in summer and so on? So I don't have to go through this very in detail, but you can see easily. So the supply in China is many courses, hundreds of them. Yeah, they would like to attract foreign students. Yeah, and then interestingly, there are also free summer courses, yeah, funded by for example, Confucius Institute's partner university in China and so on, and local government-funded courses, free. But what I noticed that our students are not very interested in these. I said, what? Why don't you go to courses which are free? Unfortunately, we didn't have many people taking up this kind of free courses. So what do they want? That's my question. We have these kind of students, university students, secondary school students, adults, and so on. So I said, okay, let's see what we can do to help these people. What about this? For example, the Chinese heritage students, they can go to China for this 寻根之旅, for example. It's all free. The children, yeah, they do go. I don't think they particularly enjoy many of these activities. Okay, I'll talk about my project later, but then the background is that, you see, those who don't know Chinese, you don't have to read in detail, but this is our Confucius Institute's partner university in China, free summer courses. Hardly any student would be interested in this. And then this Shanghai University of Finance Economics, free business Chinese course. Some people are interested, but they have specific requirements and so on. So it's not available for all. Okay, very quickly. And the Sichuan University, they have this immersion program and so on. It's all, you can see that the university will subsidize their travel and lodging costs now. So what I'm trying to say is that China, from the Chinese side, they have made a huge effort to attract foreign students. That's all fine. So I've told our students, say, would you be interested in that? So our students say, okay, you have language courses in China. I know hundreds of them, but many of them say, no, I'm not interested in any language courses. And increasingly, people can take courses anywhere. They can take it online. Why do they have to go to China to take the language courses? So not really. And then what about, they just ask me, can I go to China to have, for example, to be involved in internships? Well, the difficulty is not whether the Chinese would like to have our students, it's that they can't have the visa. The Chinese government does not encourage people, for example, a student to go there to have a visa for internship. So my question was, is there anything between the two so that we can combine language courses and internship? Knowing that internships is not necessarily a good option, it's mainly because of the visa issue, all right? That's why I developed this project in 2018. So I wanted to combine the language learning with work experiences. Look at the other modern foreign languages in the UK. People go to France, Germany, Spain, and Spain. They either study in the university or they simply work, and that's part of their year abroad. I was astonished. People say, for example, they just say, okay, I worked in the hotel, and that was my year abroad, and they made money, and they got paid. It's not possible for China. I would like to see this happen in the future, but not now. So, so the question is, how do we combine internship with language practice to replace, for example, the classroom-based teaching, which is not particularly attractive? And then the question is, we need to have danwei. We need to have a work unit where they take our students. That's not easy. So I embarked on this project and funded by the Sino-British Fellowship Trust. So my first project is in Shandong University of Science and Technology in Qingdao. I went there and talked to these danwei. They say, oh, well, welcome. We welcome your students. Come and do this. And I say, okay, you tell me what kind of students you would like to have and what kind of posts. Or they say, okay, you can come and do the assistant editors. Oh, that's great. Okay, for advanced students and all these, you can look at it through quickly. So all these danweis say, okay, send your students here. We would help them with their working experience at the same time learning a language. I say, okay, fine. And then we managed to recruit some students, no textbooks, because remember, it's not classroom-based teaching. So our materials are two main areas. Text related to the campus, for example, they go there just to study things about the life of the fellow students in China. Okay, what do they do and so on. And the city, shopping and so on, all in Chinese, of course. So nothing to do with the textbook. Okay, so we don't have textbook. And then It's related to the work. They will be working in the work unit. So let's read something about the work unit, the type of work you're going to do, and so on. So that's one thing. We talk about how to get to the workplace, and then the students have to decide what bus to take and whether to take taxi, how much it costs, and so on. It's all real. So their learning is geared to working experience because they are going to work in this Danwei, and they have to decide how to travel. It's not very easy because campus-based learning does not involve this. If you go out to do shopping, it's up to you. But this project, it involves a lot that the students have to learn in advance in order to work. Okay. It was fairly successful. We have some students, they were very happy. So I was delighted. So I started with another project, the Qingdao project, the Shandong Keji Daxue one continued. So for example, next year, if people want to go, that's fine, still there. So I started another one. So our students asked us saying, okay, I don't want to work in the work unit, but I want to be involved in learning a culture where I do it as the local people do. It's not necessarily work, for example. So I found this Taoist temple, and we say, okay, let's go there and let's do these. We study texts on Taoist culture, yeah, read some Zhuangzi, read some of the Yuyan and so on. But we do other things, such as copy Taoist scriptures and practice this kind of qigong and so on, and meditation. And it was, see, look at, there's our student copying the scripture. They knew nothing. It's all right. It's the experience of sitting there in a very quiet evening, yeah, on your own with a brush, and then put your heart and soul into doing something. Yeah, during the daytime, you could study some of that, but in the evening, quietly copy this scripture. Physical exercise, some foreign students from SOAS, yeah, and so on, that's me. So you actually were there, involved in all these activities, and meditation in the evening, yeah. So this is the master, you follow him, he will tell you why we do this and so on. So I just find it very interesting. Our students really enjoyed it. It's so unique. And then I said, okay, I'm very happy with our two projects. Let's do a new one. I designed another one for this year. I got the funding. Then we know what happened. So it's canceled. So very briefly, so these are my projects I would really like to share with other people, and hope more students, more teachers would be involved in this, helping our students to go to China, to have different kind of experience rather than classroom-based teaching.
Thank you, Dr. Song, for sharing. I'm so impressed and also fascinated with all this range of the project you do. I think it just made me think about how important the relevance of what students study and also the experience. I have a few questions. Some is more probably useful for teachers, and others probably I want to hear how students feel about their experiences. So you mentioned about the funding. Is it quite difficult to apply funding for this kind of projects?
Not in my case, because I was very lucky. See, when I applied for this funding, this Sino-British Fellowship Trust, it's for SOAS staff. So it's very convenient. In the past, for the past 10, 15, 12 years, for example, I mainly applied for funding to attend international conferences. Yeah, so it was, I was successful most of the time. And then the project started 3 years ago, and I applied, I think, 5 times. I got 4 successful applications. So for me, that was easy. But there are other projects. I think if you put your case, argue your case in the right way, people would sponsor this. I personally think it's the future.
And the second one is about collaboration. So you mentioned, you physically visited, particularly with the Qingdao project.
Yes.
And even the Taoism, finding the temple and someone's willing to collaborate. So that fascinates me as well. So Can you tell us a little bit more how you established this kind of partnership?
I think it's partly to do with luck, because I met, interestingly, so for example, many Chinese universities would like to have foreign students. They are desperate in some way. However, how do we choose? You have to know people there so that you can be sure that they do the right thing. Otherwise, I just use, in the past, I say, okay, tell our students, you go to China, there are many universities, choose one of them. They are more or less the same. Okay, you may be lucky to have a good one. So no, not with project. You have to be extremely careful, because it's, especially if it is beyond the classroom, because there is management, there is control, there is the local conditions and so on. So I talked to this teacher at Shandong Keji Daxue. Okay, so they say, okay, we can do all this. Okay, I said, okay, you can tell me that, but I want to go there and check myself. I physically went to all these places, all these danwei, and talked to the people there, and I was happy that the good places for us for our students to go. So not easy, but gradually, once established, you just go there once, and then the Chinese side would know what to do, because they didn't know. They said they could do, but we don't know. So it's the collaboration between the British University and other standways in China, either work units or universities and so on. It was, as you said, very crucial. The temple one, I happen to know the Daozhang, the head.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of touched on my final question related to more kind of suggestion for teachers. So do you think it's essential for you to go every year with the students in terms of management of the projects?
No. I think the project, once it's started, when you are happy with it, that's fine, because you want to be sure that the Chinese side will know what to do, because they also tried it. There were problems, and we solved it together. So in the future, when they run it, I know, because they have the experience. But we need someone in the UK as a contact person. I think that's very important. It's just to send people there without any supervision and so on. Because it's part of their learning. That's the focus of their experiences.
Okay, great. So then I have some questions related to more students. So are these mainly undergraduate students who went on this project?
No, any, but the problem is that it's to do with the language level. You can see that you can see some of the posts, the work experience posts, they require a higher standard of Chinese. Therefore, once you've had this kind of formal establishment, your job description would say clearly what level of Chinese it requires. Can you imagine the impact on our learners? If you want to be an assistant editor, okay, work hard here at the LSE. If your Chinese up to HSK 5, you can join them. So that's it. So our students say, okay, right, my Chinese, I want to do this. Okay, work hard here. So that's why I want to expand our university teaching to their future. Okay.
Yeah, great. And do you do some kind of evaluation? So I can see, I can clearly see how and why students would enjoy such a unique experience. And my question would be, after they come back, do you observe their language proficiency actually improve? And do you do some kind of assessment to understand that?
No, we didn't do that, but we had normal feedback and so on. I think it's very individual. That's why it's very different from classroom-based teaching. In a classroom-based teaching, they have classroom assessment. They could have exams, not with work experience. It's very open, and it all depends on individuals. Some students learn very fast, not just from their working experience. It's just being there. They absorb more. I want to emphasize this in our teaching now. Yeah, remember this is not just you're working towards the exam. No. It's more than that. You learn in order to work in the environment where Chinese is the language, and then you work with Chinese. So the classroom-based teaching now should be really to the future. That's my point of doing this kind of project, for the students to know, oh wow, that's the future if we want to do this, but my Chinese is not good enough. Therefore, when I come back, I need to do this and that in order to do that in the future.
Right, right. So it's like a little test for the real experience and real motivation. Great.
Right.
So my final question, really important question for all the friends of the Espresso. I know with your 30 years of experience, if you were going to give your top 3 tips to any learners of Chinese, what would you say?
There are many, for example, tips that I could say, but I would like to highlight 3. The
So,
first, the first one is that people are different. I mean, people say, "Oh, Song Lao Shi, that's obvious." Of course, it is obvious, but it follows that we do things differently. However, in the classroom-based teaching, we probably are exposed to one type of teaching. We do the same kind of homework and so on. So my first tip to the students is that there are many learning strategies and techniques in terms of learning and improving each of the 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing. It's almost impossible for me or for any teacher to tell a learner or students in general saying, okay, if you do this, you'll be successful. We can't say that because their success is not guaranteed. However, we could provide the students different ways of learning and let them discover and find out what works for them. So that's my first tip. So all learners should should rather make an effort to try different things and see what works and what doesn't. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, we should understand that learning does not always follow an upward curve. We all want to learn fast and to make big and quick progress, but it's not always like that. So this tip tells all learners, I want to tell them that learning is a complicated process. Therefore, sometimes the progress may be very slow. It's just natural or sometimes inevitable. So one needs to be a little bit patient. It need to be patient. Yeah, that's my second advice. The third one is that as a learner, one should be observant. That is to say, pay attention to what is not so obvious, yeah, and reflect on that. For example, we need to pay attention to how people use a word and expression in a given context. So in a classroom-based teaching, again, we have a textbook and so on. So that restricts people from observing something very different and so on. The general point is noticing comes before learning. That's my third point. So pay attention to things, everything, but especially things which are not necessarily obvious. And I've noticed that some of the good learners tend to have this ability. They are very observant and notice the difference, and therefore they learn more and better.
great, great. Thank you so much for these wonderful advices. And also, like, I learned a lot through your project as well. As you know, at LSE, we have this new degree, right? BSc International Relations and Chinese, and involve students to go year abroad. And all your fascinating projects really inspire me. So thank you so much, Song Laoshi, for joining Zi Espresso and share your teaching and share your advice to all learners out there.
Thank you, Xiang Laoshi, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for watching. So I'm looking forward to see you next time. 再见。